The SCP Foundation is one of the greatest brainchilds of the internet. A bunch of people sharing ideas over the internet to make a list of creatures, some deadly, some innocent, and others world-ending, all with the intention of entertaining everyone who comes to read them. Each SCP in the SCP Foundation is unique and have some interesting backstories. The SCP I'm bringing you here today is SCP-2598, otherwise known as the Moth Salesman. I'm your host, Shane Arena, and on today's Life's Biggest Questions, we are going to be answering the question, what if SCP-2598 was real? As is tradition over here at Life's Biggest Questions, we are going to start this with a little breakdown as to what this creature in question is before we talk about what if it was real. So what is SCP-2598? As I mentioned before, he is known as the Moth Salesman. He is a regular sized moth and has a small helmet. Other than the helmet, there's nothing strange about him. He is object class safe, so you don't need to worry about him trying to kill you and eat you. Really, the only thing he seems very eager to do is sell to you. At heart, this SCP is a salesman at all times. If you attempt to communicate with this bite-sized SCP, he will talk to you for as long as you want, potentially for hours if you let him, but no matter what you try to talk about with him, he will always take the conversation towards a sales pitch about his little helmet that he wears. His goal is to sell as many helmets as he can, and he will take every angle you can think of. If the helmet is too small for you, then maybe you can buy the helmet for a friend. If the helmet is too much money, well, that is fine, because you can pay for this useful tool with 3 small installments of $19.99. Would you like to know about the Moth's life and why he is able to talk to people? Well, he will tell you, and you better believe the story will lead into why you should buy this trusted helmet. Now, how is the Moth able to talk to people? Well, it is because the helmet he wears and the one he's so desperately trying to sell to every last person he talks to. He communicates through Morse code. He will tap his head and the helmet against your head or any person he is talking to, in the classic style of military communication known as Morse code. He understands all responses through the spoken word, but must respond in Morse code. Also, it seems he only wants to talk to the customer through head taps. People at the SCP Foundation have tried to supply SCP-2598 with communication pads that he could use to talk to someone, but he will never acknowledge them. This could be because the Moth Salesman has no idea how to use these communication pads, or it could be because he has no interest in using them. Now that you have an idea of what this SCP looks like and what his motivations are, what would it look like if this SCP was real? Well, if information of the SCP was ever leaked into the public, it would have one of two outcomes. If it was ever interviewed, it would immediately go viral. There would be memes and videos all over the world of this moth and that it could talk to people. Everyone would want to know how he is able to talk to people, and all people would get in response is the continual sales pitch for the helmet that he is desperately trying to sell. This would most likely lead down the first option. People would begin an endless investigation and interrogation to try and determine what this moth wants, and in the end they would find out he has nothing to offer except for the sales pitch. Although the moth would be sentient, he would most likely be ignored, shunned from society like all door-to-door salesmen. People wouldn't kill it because they are sentient beings, but people would do everything they could to slip away from this moth sales pitch. We might see them get ignored to the point where there is so little helmets that are sold that the Moth Salesman eventually vanishes from society and they go extinct. Then the idea of the Moth Salesman would be lost to humanity. It would become a dream, a fad that blew up in a decade, affected our culture, and then once people got tired of it, it was gone forever. Or we could see the exact opposite happen. What if the little moth was able to get into the hearts and minds of people and started to make sales? Then we might see the Moth helmets start as a small brand, maybe a little pop-up, but then it would grow. It would hit the mainstream as something you would have to have. The new trendy item. Kylie Jenner would have one of these moth helmets as a pendant on her necklace, and then the next thing you know, everyone would be trying to get one. And as for the Moth's company, it would evolve. Maybe his ability to sell would even evolve. Then he would grow his business and make it into an empire, moving away from only selling helmets and get into the game of selling all sorts of clothing. Now Moth brand would become a household name. Everyone and their dog would own something that comes from the massive corporation known as Moth Corp. And to run this massive empire, there would be a mixture of humans and moths. Moths who have been taught the ability to communicate with humans the same way that SCP-2598 has been doing for all this time. This would change how our society works. We would have moths living and working in the same places as people. With this many moths and the ability to learn and communicate, some of them would have to venture into other passions. A moth who only wants to sell would be an old stereotype and would almost become prejudice. Moths would have to move into the government. They would need their own representation communication. People hanging out with moths all day would create relationships, and people would become friends with moths, maybe even lovers. The moth-human connection would grow deep. We would see the first moth on the moon, and future civilizations would be built around moths and humans living together. Of course, we would never be able to inbreed, but the moths would always be close in our hearts. I think it's safe to say if SCP-2598 was real, the world would be a very strange place. Not more dangerous, but definitely more weird. I think we have cracked the case of what it might look like if SCP-2598 was real. Let me know in the comments what you think the world would look like if this SCP took flight and started selling helmets to the world. Until next time, I've been your host, Shane Arena, and I'm here to answer all your questions.